So thank you all so much for coming through, for showing up for our All About Love Community Care System Session 2. This month, we are inviting you to join us as we come together to practice love and honor the wealth of community care, community-led care and mutual aid offerings, collective organizations, practices that we cherish. All About Love Community Care Systems is a month-long assembly that will bring together attendees, speakers, and event partners to explore new ways of caring for Boston's most marginalized communities. This workshop in particular is called Thoughtful Crisis Care. Thoughtful crisis care must center and care for the most marginalized people in our communities. It's a value held by organizations like Cambridge Heart and Unity Circles, both which are making their mark in Boston's network of care systems. I'm going to introduce Dara, and then I'm going to introduce Sophia real quick. So Dara Bayer is a social justice organizer, educator, visual artist who works to build interconnected and equitable communities through restorative justice philosophies and practices. Dara comes to us from Cambridge Heart today. Sophia Meadows-Muriel is a senior Commonwealth Honors student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, double majoring in Afro-American Studies and Social Thought, Political Economy, with a minor in Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. Sophia got involved with Unity Circles as a participant in the 2020 Transformative Justice Practitioner Program and is currently facilitating the 2022 TJPP cohort. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna pin you both real quick and we can get started.
Thank you all. I'm really honored to be here tonight. Battled through traffic from work. So I think both Sophia and I, we were texting a little earlier and we were like, let's just wing it and be in conversation with each other. We work really closely together in a lot of ways. And so we're just really excited to get to be in conversation with you all. It's an honor to be part of this program and to share some of the work that we're doing. I'm going to pass it to Sophia in a second, but I did want to take a moment. This feels really important to me, and I think to a lot of the people I'm in community with at Heart, at Unity Circles, to give gratitude to those who have cared for us, whose shoulders we stand on, who have supported us in arriving to this moment. In the spirit of thinking about systems of care, we all are products of that, right? We wouldn't exist without our ancestors who loved us into existence and sacrificed for us and cared for us, those who are in our lineage, and also those who have just fought for us. I'm thinking about Mel King and his recent transition in terms of the city of Boston, and just the countless others whose names we know and don't know who have worked to create more life-giving worlds for us. So just inviting us to take a moment to sit with that, to think about who supported us in arriving today, or in our lifetime, maybe, like all the people kind of holding us up and propping us up, and also other beings, other life as well. And, also inviting folks to put those names in the chat if you wish, just to hold us in this circle of conversation and connection around care. So taking that deep breath in and holding that, I'm really thinking about my grandmother, Elise Hall Heller, right now. I just came back from South Carolina and got to visit my grandfather, my last living grandparent there. And that's where she's from as well. And just thinking about all the ways that she was a matriarch and held space for my family and, the generations to come as well through her. So I'm going to pass it to you, Sophia, if you wanted to share anything else before we start.
Dara, do you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, I got new headphones, y'all. Sometimes Zoom headphones don't work. But yeah, LOL to bios. I guess updates. Since that bio is, I am a graduate, y'all, undergrad at UMass Amherst. Okay, I've been working since September. I work in a BPS school and with high schoolers every day, and I also do an after-school program with them once a week for self-identifying Black students, and I also work part-time in Unity Circles as the Director of Partnerships. And this summer, I will be co-facilitating our TJPP cohort. Yeah, today was a very chaotic day for me, y'all, not gonna lie. Yeah, I just got news that, someone that I grew up with passed away. And so, yeah, I'm sitting with that. I'm sitting with the complexities of our relationship, which I'll dive into later. But yeah, today's a very in-between day. I apologize for the noise or anything like that. Could not make it home by the time that this started. So I had to hop into a cafe and JP, the vibes. So yeah, that's just being transparent about where I'm at and the things that are on my mind. And I made a presentation. Yeah, presentations, they can help. If someone wants to see it, I'll send you the link. But wanted to more be in conversation and more reflect and share honestly about, not only what we do in Unity Circles, and also show light of me and Dara's relationship as an example of how we care for each other. So I hope y'all get a taste of that as well. I think to start off, I think folks would obviously love to hear about heart. And I think I always ask you the question of where were your beginnings, right? What got you into this work and how does that support you in thinking about care in relation to your role at heart?
Thank you for asking me that question, Sophia. And yeah, Sophia and I, just so you all know, Sophia and I work very closely together. We've had the privilege of being in relationship since 2020. So our collaboration and connection is deep within Unity Circles, but also just as human beings. And yeah, I think my bio would look different if I write it now too. I think those were a little bit outdated, but excited to be here as connected to two different organizations, but also relationships, right? And I think that's what Sophia and I will lead on in this conversation and talking about the work we do. So just to share a tiny bit more about myself, I live in Boston. I live in Roslindale currently, but was born in Boston, at home in a collective house. When I think of care, I actually think about the legacy of my parents who met doing radical organizing work in DC, very young, fighting Reagan's horrible economic policies, and built kind of squatted a building and opened it up for folks who were houseless and created community there. They were part of this organization called the Creative Community for Nonviolence. And so I think about their legacy a lot and how I move in the world and the choices I make. And also there was a lot of harm inside that community. So thinking about our efforts to create a better world of care, but also that we are constantly unlearning a lot of harm and violent ways of being, and that it takes a lot of work internally to also be living into that in our interpersonal relationships. And I think I've experienced that a lot in organizing spaces. So that's really what has brought me, I think, into this work. I know we don't have a ton of time, so I'm gonna try to be concise about that. But I grew up, my parents split up when I was very young, and my mom and I moved to Cambridge. And so I actually spent most of my childhood, actually pretty much all of my childhood. We lived in Boston for a couple of years, but I went to school in Cambridge, graduated from high school there, and felt mixed about, it's I think when I started living in Boston as an adult, everyone's like, you lived in Cambridge, Lanebridge, y'all are snooty and y'all are mad privileged over there. And that was interesting to me. There was definitely this divide that I realized existed between the two communities, and kind of wanted to distance myself from having grown up there. And I think Cambridge is a complex place. But there are many marginalized communities in Cambridge. It's also a very diverse place. I think my communities were very diverse growing up, and I had the opportunity to live and experience being with many, many different types of people from all over the world. And so in 2020, when the uprisings happened, I reconnected with one of my really good friends from high school, Stephanie Garand, who I want to bring into the space because Heart would not exist without the kind of monumental effort she has put into manifesting Heart, manifesting organizing in Cambridge. But we came together around this movement of abolition, and we're really concerned about the discourse in Cambridge around defunding the police, and particularly like other Black officials and people in power who are basically saying, Black people love the police in Cambridge. We're really different there. And we're like, I don't think that's actually true. And wanting to make sure there was a narrative and a way to speak out to the fact that no, there's like many people who are harmed by policing in Cambridge, and what does it mean to hold the city accountable to actually creating something different? And so we were pushing for that in an advocacy way. When it was clear the city wasn't going to be creating anything different, or they're going to drag their feet, we built a community process. And I say we, this is not just her and I, this is like a collective of folks engaged in a coalition of building a community process to envision what a model of community care and crisis response could look like. And so HEART was born from that process. It was born from a participatory research process or action process in which community members were surveyed, engaged in like weekly conversations, like these kinds of conversations. We invited folks from all over the country who are doing alternative response work, like Macro, like Mental Health First, like Project Let's. There's like really amazing work happening all over the country around folks thinking about how do we take care of each other and respond to harm in ways that aren't carceral, that exist outside of the police. And so just kind of holding like all of that. And that's where HEART came into fruition. I want to give a shout out to one of our responders who's on the call right now, Amanda Rosana. Orosa is here, and really grateful for her presence here. But we're a year ago, we just had hired 7 responders, and now we have 10 staff members. So we are building an organization that is moving towards really trying to center the most marginalized community members, where the folks who are responding are peers. We're thinking about peer response and not being mandated reporters in how we engage in responding to crises, thinking about community cohesion, like how are we not just responding, but also proactively creating conditions where crises don't happen. So we're engaged in thinking about mutual aid in our work, and building those relationships in communities. And I think it starts most importantly with the way we engage in our organization, which is trying to build a culture of care among us as staff members and the networks of volunteers and board members and broader community that we are connected to, because this has been a very collaborative and participatory process in creating HEART. So I'll just stop there for now, and I'll pass it back to you, Sophia, maybe to share a bit about Unity Circles and your journey to getting into Unity Circles and what you think about around our work there.
Yeah. So I have been involved in Unity Circles since 2020 as a member of their first transformative justice practitioner program. So to take a step back, as we do, we always define, what these justices are. And so for me, I define transformative justice as a community-based response to when violence, harm, or conflict occurs in our communities, by getting to the root cause as to why this happens, right? And at least for me, what we always stress, as well as the people that have taught me, is to emphasize the importance of defining, as well as that transformative justice is a type of practice that doesn't rely or engage with the state. And that is because, it comes from a long history of folks that have been the most impacted by these conditions, such as queer folks, undocumented folks, Black and brown folks, Indigenous folks, disabled communities. That is the lineage that this practice comes from. And so as part of defining, and at least for me, the importance of combating things like erasure, right? It is always important that I define where things come from and emphasize that our communities have been doing this, right? Just because someone has labeled something maybe 20 years ago as a thing, right? I want to emphasize like this is something that has been going on for a long time, right? And so I wanted to make sure I began with that. And so in terms of how I got into the work, yeah, I was a young person still in college. My whole program was online at the time, which I think is really interesting in terms of how we cultivate a space in which folks were, the world was going through a pandemic, as well as like global uprise on issues of multitude of injustices, right? And so there was that balance of like virtually being in the space with folks and sharing, and externally being in my own community and being a young person and supporting and engaging in protests and holding space, to have conversations about what alternatives can look like for us. And so I think that is what I appreciate in school. It's really ironic that I'm here because in school as a senior, we were learning about alternative economies, and I had to actually do a paper on Ujima, right? So it's very full circle for me to be here right now. But I think about co-ops. I just think about what does it mean to reconfigure how capitalism is showing up in terms of our relationships, right? And reconfigure that to something that aligns with us, something that can actually help us reconsidering what it means to show up for each other. What is folks' capacities, deciphering between what is a want and a need. These are all things in which we discussed in our program, and also like as a student, right? I was learning these things also simultaneously from a more theoretical analysis. And so now that I am like a part-time staffer, y'all, I've had a lot of different roles in unity circles, and that has been the best part in terms of caring for me, right? Like as a 20-year-old, right? I think as an organization, they actively wanting to invest and take time in building and believing in me and my different capacities. Like Unity Circles is really the type of organizations that once you're involved, right, regardless of how you can show up, if you want to show up, we're going to find very creative ways to support you, and not only like leaning into your gifts, right, but also just being able to say that you want to be present. And so I appreciated that because, I was balancing school, I was balancing all this stuff. So I went from a participant to then like a board member to then they were like, do you want to do a cohort? And I was like, sure. I did that with one of my good friends. And then to now, supporting apprentices last summer, right? Like every iteration and every season, it feels as though we're trying to think creatively about how we want to ensure that one, we stay in contact with folks if they want to, right? And we feel like we can support people's gifts and the things that they're interested. So example, we have a lot of like artists, right? And so we think about, okay, how can we engage in transformative justice ideas, and how does that rely and engage in art? For me, I'm a nerd, I like to read, I like to archive. Those are things that are important to me. And so, thinking about as well as someone that is, leaning into what does alternative responses look like, right? What does partnerships look like? I get to explore that as someone that, this position was never created before. And so I think what I appreciate is, this newness, the desire to want to remain in connection, because, they believe in my capacity, even when I'm not sure. And yeah, I think the work that I do now in terms of conversation about care, at least for me, how I understand it as someone that is the director of partnerships, quite literally, I am trying to build partnerships in alignment with our values, such as reciprocity, justice, transformation, healing. Those are the values that are important to us. And what does that actually look like to practice those values, right? So what are the principles that we talk about values as being, these ideas and principles being the action-based responses to those values that are important to us. And so as someone that, is in charge of engaging in partnerships, it's really important that we move away from transactional engagements with each other, right? That, unfortunately is a part of the nonprofit industrial complex, and getting to the root of like, care is about the specificity that you choose and that you practice to show up for somebody else. And I think I understand that in my role, I don't feel the pressure in terms of like timelines and all this stuff, right? Like we can be very transparent and honest about it is going to take time to build partnerships. It is going to build time to, really say that you want to collaborate with somebody, right? And hopefully that that aligns with folks too, right? And I think, at least for me, I think about how can I show up for each other? How can I show up and consider their capacity, their needs, their wants, in relation to how we collaborate, right? So sometimes, I don't know if y'all talk to other people in the community, people just don't have the capacity for a multitude of reasons, right? And so how can we kind of lessen the realities that you're going through, whether it's like being someone that they can vent to, or being someone in which we just collaborate about grants, right? And we say, these are grants that align with each other, like, let's just send it back and forth. Or even, again, just being able to say, do you need meals, right? How can we as partners show up for each other in a multitude of ways? I think is what I appreciate about my role. At its center is care, because we deeply care about each other, and I want to show people that I care about them, and I want to build that trust to think about what collaboration and partnership can mean for us. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting role. I think my role is about care at its root, and I hope other orgs or other positions such as like community engagement or partnerships think about that at its root. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me and how I've been thinking about my role and what's brought me to work now. And yeah, I think Dara, what I'd like to ask is, as Heart is going to be, in fruition, right? Like, people are going to be able to respond to y'all soon. How have y'all been thinking about, care, since y'all been doing a lot of like the workshops and the prep work to think about care, but now that you are going to be engaging with a really large community of people, right? How have y'all begun to strategize of how care can show up and needs to be practiced within the responders?
Yeah, thank you for that. And also, I just want to do a time check. How much time do we have? Because I know there's Q&A. Is it till 7, or just want to honor what the time is so I don't talk and we also have space for folks to ask questions?
Of course, yeah, no, our workshop ends at 7:15, so I think if we leave like 10-ish minutes for Q&A, that's fine.
Okay, cool. Yes, and also, Amanda, if you want to jump in, you're welcome to, no pressure, but you have a lot of insight into this too, because we work together every day and Amanda's brilliant. So just want to offer, feel free to join this conversation if you have things you want to add. But yeah, I think we've been doing a lot of work. So the responders have been in training for a year. So they got we are actually celebrating our 1-year anniversary. Tuesday was the official day where we started this path together. I wasn't working for Heart at that time as like a staff member, but I've been doing the organizing community work, had been doing that for a while. So I got to be in that first day with the folks who were going to be in this responder role. And I would say that the training has been deeply extensive, but also deeply personal, right? That in order to show up, I think, for folks, we also have to tend to our own personal work, right? Tend to our own histories of trauma, our own histories of pain. And really, in terms of what we think about around accountability, is like accountability first and foremost is a self-practice, right? It's a practice of engaging with each other and engaging ourselves, and then with our most intimate relationships. And that we have to care for ourselves really well if we're going to be able to show up and care for others. Because when we don't care for ourselves, or don't care for, like, in terms of our organization, we don't practice collective care of making sure that our well-being is centered, then we're going to cause harm, like if we're trying to show up for a crisis. And we've definitely seen like moments, and there's been dips and turns and all sorts of things for many of us in that space where, our care practices for ourselves and the things that we need to do to keep our cup full aren't necessarily happening. And then it's really hard to show up in the role that we're occupying. I'm not a responder, I'm in a more admin role or co-director role, but we all are kind of holding this work together right now. And so we've had countless spaces of processing, building accountability systems for ourselves. We have a code of ethics that we co-created. We built all of these different working groups to build the infrastructure of our organization from how to address harm and conflict to how do we give each other feedback to our attendance policies, like what are policies that reflect our values of care, healing, transformative accountability, community. And so, we've built these practices for ourselves and these guidelines for ourselves that we've all weighed in on, that we all consented to. So I think that's one way that we're practicing care, is that we've created accountability systems that we've all said we can do our best to try to live up to this. And we're inviting feedback, we're inviting practices of calling in and support, mostly support when that doesn't happen, right? And so those are things that are like actively going on in our organization. They're living documents, like they're ones that we will come back to and revisit I think we agreed every 6 months. But really making sure we have those foundations in place. We have a debrief practice, right? Like we're doing non-emergency response right now. So community members are reaching out to us. We're not doing mobile crisis response yet, but we are hoping to get there by the summer. So when community members reach out to us, we're committed to not engaging alone in anything we do. That's actually a really significant practice for us. And I think it's a practice rooted in care, that it's really important that we have support when we're supporting others. So because there's things that we don't see, there's insights that other people might have, blind spots that we each have. And so making sure that we have this practice. And right now, it's very collective, right? So community members will reach out to us through email, or we have an intake form now, which I can also drop in the chat. And then we talk about what the situations are, who might be best to be a point person for it, but that we're always kind of updating each other and sharing and getting feedback about, this person is needing a lot of emotional support related to getting out of a DV situation. Like how are we navigating resources for them or supporting them? This person is dealing with housing insecurity and we need to find them stable housing, or like supporting them with trying to find stable housing. These are different resources that we can share with them. Just like we're supporting a range of situations that are related to emotional support, material needs, addressing conflict that might be arising in their lives. So I think all of that really has creating these collective spaces of communication, of sharing, of collaboration are very rooted in care. We also have like wellness time. So everyone offers wellness. Like there's a practice every Friday where people rotate facilitating a wellness activity, sharing what they do for themselves, but inviting other people to practice that. And we're really trying to build in the system so that when we are doing much higher stakes work, when people are actually calling us and needing us to show up in the moment around a crisis, that we are really well prepared to hold each other when that happens. And I would also say we're working a lot on boundaries. That's a huge practice around care. So I know that's something I really, really struggle with, because I really, I think there's a lot of reasons I struggle with that, but I think one is, I want to be of service. I want to support. I want to make sure people feel cared for. And that can sometimes happen at the expense of myself in terms of like my own needs. And it can also sometimes put me in a position of overextending myself in a way where I can't actually show up in a good way for myself or for others. And so this is a huge thing for us, doing crisis response work, and where people are really struggling with whatever is happening in their life and needing and wanting support, but also having to be like as transparent as possible about what we can offer, and what our boundaries are about what we can offer. And so we're really sorting those things out and processing that. I'm happy to talk more about the specifics of it, but I think having really good boundaries about we're only available at these times so that the rest of the time we can rest, so that when we come back, we can show up in a good way, and really be present for people when they need us, and for each other also. I'm curious, Sophia, if you want to share anything about just some of the active work that Unity Circles is doing now to enact care in community and what that looks like more specifically.
Yeah. So I think yeah, we have, I feel like we have so many different things going on. But I think too that I want to share light and kind of dive into more is first diving more into JPP. So wanted to always shout out my teachers, Sochi, Dara, and Valeria, for taking the time to hold space with us. Our transformative justice practitioner program came initially from students at Brown, where Dara used to work at, and then it transitioned into the community. And so that is like something that at its heart, I know the co-facilitators and the creators of the curriculum, along with Dara at Brown, like wanted. And so happy to be the first iteration. Each cohort is a group of young people between the ages of 18 to 25, in which, you know, we engage in a 6-month intensive in which during the summer, we meet multiple times a week, and then transitioning into the fall to do a kind of YPAR project, so youth participatory action research project, that kind of ends our time together, but it's not really an end because we always find ways to stay connected. And so at least for me, how we thought about care in those iterations, or how we're trying to think about care, is not only what Dara was saying about accountability partners, especially with folks that, you know, we take the time to specifically be able to identify how people are showing up and maybe things that they're struggling about. So I know with my partners, it'd be like checking in to see if they've done their reading, checking in with their mind and their spirit, and being like, how are you showing up today? Can you give me like a thumbs up, thumbs down? If, you know, I think we stress the importance of presence, right? Presence being like the fact that you showed up, like you just showed up. You know what I'm saying? And being able to verbalize your capacity is what we appreciate, right? So being like, if you don't want to share today, no one's like, this is not school, right? And so emphasizing to folks that, you know, we appreciate your consistent presence. And even if, you know, you can't show up in the way that you'd like, being able to verbalize in a form that feels best for you is what we greatly appreciate. I also think that, you know, with my role as the director of partnerships, I have been trying to support a space in which other organizations from Boston and greater Boston that have similar values as us can come together to form what is a collective network. You know, this word we realize through research comes from the Zapatistas, which is really awesome. And for us, it's really thinking about what does it mean to partner with other orgs in our community and feel not only do we have that really deep interpersonal relationship, and we also feel like we can show up for each other in a multitude of capacities. And so, you know, 5 years from now, what it would be amazing to have is this kind of collective network of orgs in our community that is free flowing, right? Like you can come in and out due to your capacity or different issues that are going on, but you know, being able to respond when violence is happening in our community actively, right, alongside folks like Harvard, that is the goal of what we're trying to do. So we're really trying to support, again, youth, in particular, young adults, because we believe that, you know, just due to different realities and different government structures, right, like 18 to 25, sometimes, you know, you're forgotten for a multitude of reasons, right? And so emphasizing that, you know, we have folks in our community that have been impacted by these conditions that are able to address when things are happening in their communities, because they've already been doing it, right? It's more just affirming that they can and that they should, and that, you know, everyone is capable of holding that space if they have the capacity to do so in that moment. And so that's what I've been working on. It's been like basically monthly meetings with different orgs in our communities, taking the time to get to know each other. I'm like, get to know each other is not like the weight of like what our meetings are really like, but it is an intergenerational space. All our orgs either support folks that are actively impacted by carceral conditions, such as parents and young people that have folks that are incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, folks that have lost their children to violence in the community, as well as heart, right? There's a lot of different orgs, and though our value and our down the line is very similar, and or will coexist, right? And we're gonna cross paths. And so, yeah, I'm not doing the meetings justice, I feel like, but it is a moment similar to, I feel like, spaces like Ujima, people that are thinking about alternatives. It is the first moment as a young person where I feel like we're taking the time to think about, okay, what does abolition look like after we tore everything up and we're building, right? So we're in the process of building and imagining. I feel like that at its essence is what these meetings are. If I can't like because I make the agendas, which is hilarious. Like I couldn't even tell y'all, because yeah, in the moment it's like you have to be there, you know. But yeah, I think we're painting right now, and that is like what is super exciting is we're visualizing in our meetings, like for real, what does it take for us to build an alternative, and I think that is at its essence like what our meetings are, like once a month, as well as just doing really fun like land projects, et cetera, et cetera. But all these things incorporate care. And I think on a larger note, something just more broad that I was sitting with today, you know, like when you hear just the news that someone in your community passes away, is life is complex. And I realized a long time ago, right, even the people that have caused you harm, like deeply, right, you realize that the things that led up to that point and after, right, many times is the fact that they are not cared for, right? And care, again, is an expensive thing, from parental realities to community realities to, you know, getting the mental health services and or like alternative groups, right? Because, you know, psych wards and all these things are very actively dangerous in many capacities. Same with, you know, folks that are houseless, right? Like that is a very survival mode and dangerous space to be in. And so I feel like, you know, after like a deep cry, right? I think I sat with like, you know, I wish he had received the care that he deserved and had hopefully, you know, after receiving that care, realized that he did hurt me, you know, and I can still hold both of those things at the same time. And so, yeah, that is the work that I do, you know, is holding with all these different things at the same time and giving people and myself the space to share what's coming up and visualize, you know, what folks need. Yeah, so I'll leave with that.
Thank you, Sophia. I'm like holding you right now and honoring your wisdom and holding also these multiple truths as you are in this grieving process or just receiving this news. So thank you for sharing that with us. I want to pass it back to Gio to support the Q&A. Thank you.
Excellent. That was a very soul moisturizing, exchange of words. Feels wonderful to witness what's being said aloud. And also, we'd like to hear and raise up a continuation of those feelings through conversation right now. So we're gonna have a respectful Q&A with Dara and Sophia. I'm gonna start with what's been dropped in the chat already. Please keep in mind we're still following the guidelines outlined by Sierra earlier. If you have questions about that, feel free to Zoom chat me or Zoom chat Sierra. Other than that, let's get it going. So, unless you directly message them, I can't see them, so I'm going to go with what's been publicly said. I see here from John Barry. As we're working toward a world or city where transformative justice is possible, what's something you'd like to see change that you think would make the work feel easier or more accessible? John, is that what you were getting at? You still looking for an answer? Smooth. All right. I welcome either of you.
Do you want to start, Sophia?
Yeah, I can quickly say, I think capacity, like capitalism really affects how people show up, like for real. And quickly to share, I think a lot of people, due to capitalist realities, right, engage in this work as if it's a certificate that you then engage in the workforce with, and it's not. I think moving in that way affects how you show up. And yeah, in an amazing world, also the realities of capitalism and the monetary transaction for certain people is also, I think, is really, really, really hard because there's certain needs that need to be met, right? Especially when folks that, you know, are coming from really marginalized identities have to show up and do this labor, right? Like because they believe in it. It's also like very time consuming, right? So some folks, at least for me, like I'm working 2 jobs and I pick up processes because I'm excited and I'm excited for the experience. And I know that I have to really have the capacity to do so because I'm basically working on top of the 2 jobs, like over 40 hours a week, right? And so it's like, how can I show up my best way and hold space on top of the fact that, I'm not doing these processes or any of these things for the monetary reality. I'm doing it because of the community, because I want to show up for people. So I think that is what is really hard for people is the crouching capitalist realities that they experience every single day that affects how they show up.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking about capitalism too. And just, how the values of capitalism and transactional relationships can really get in the way of living our values and practicing care. I think another thing that maybe is a little less overwhelming to think about in terms of shifting is just capacity regarding our inner capacity to be in principled partnership with each other. Some people call it principled struggle. One of my mentors helped me reframe it into principled partnership. Maybe we don't want to be like constantly thinking about struggle, but what is our greater capacity? Like, I think we're not necessarily socialized or conditioned to really figure out how to be in conflict with each other in ways that actually support mutual growth and can center care all the time. And I've seen that play out many, many times over and over again. And so, I would love to see, I think, and especially in leftist movements, like people are hyper judgmental, very binary ways of thinking that don't hold a lot of nuance also when we're navigating conflict or navigating even harm. So like a greater capacity for those things in our spaces and spaces where we want to see transformation happen, and being able to live that with each other. And, we're going to say things, harmful things. I want to address, I don't know if I said lame, but I want to like name that was put out as a comment. I can't remember saying that, but if I did, I apologize. I can see how that's like a harmful word to use by, I think, Adam, who was it? Yeah, Adam G. So just like, wanting us to keep being and like having the, it's kind of like, what is the word? Endurance, like building our muscle to be in hard moments with each other. So that is something I'm thinking about.
Thank you so much to you both. Thank you, John. We'll move on to our next person, Diva, as in Diva Williams. And then after Diva will be Adam G.
Hi. I like how you threw in my last name like there's another diva in the chat. I am very interested in, talking about boundaries and burnout. I responded to someone in the chat that those are my kryptonite. I feel like I go in cycles with activism where I'm going as hard as I can, and then I crash and burn. And that's usually exacerbated by just interpersonal issues, whether it's just, how do I explain it? It seems like there are many times when activism and community work is being treated more like a social club than a social movement, which also makes it very difficult to still get work done, even if someone like you're not my personal friend, we're not going to be personal friends. And because of that, people feel like, okay, well, we just can't do this work together. But under the framework of capitalism, we learned that you go to work and yeah, there's some jerk that you hate at work, but we still, you're at Starbucks, you're going to make those lattes, whether someone is a jerk or not. You're at Barnes and Noble, you're going to sell those books, whether someone is a jerk or not. Building situations where we can do this important social work, address interpersonal issues, and not ultimately crash and burn because we're overwhelmed. That's my concern.
Thank you for that, Diva. Appreciate you naming that. It feels very real. Something I can resonate with quite a bit. Sophia, you want to start? You want me to start?
Yeah, I appreciate your questions and I, relate deeply. I think especially when more interpersonal things come up in clashing with the burnout, it's very easy to just peace out as well. Ironically enough, on Monday, my students after school, we talked about boundaries and they've been sharing what it's like setting boundaries for people. And they'd be like, they call me Miss at school. That's a whole other thing. They'd be like, Miss, I tried to set a boundary with so-and-so and they broke it. Right. And so I think, realizing and hopefully for them is like, unfortunately, people are going to break those boundaries. One, how do you verbalize that back? What does that mean in terms of people that you're surrounding yourself with? And setting boundaries is actively like an everyday practice for the rest of your life. And so, giving yourself the grace of trial and then transforming it, right? Of like, you try to set something, of like, okay, I'm only going to work in this way for this amount of time, right? And then if you realize there leads some more burnout, you're like, okay, maybe I have to reconfigure this boundary real quick and try again. That is at least for me. And also hope. Hopefully hope leads you and continues to lead you. It's okay when it doesn't, and take that time for yourself away to like think about that. Yeah, I think unity circles are very good at setting boundaries because we all work part-time. So that's the other thing is like, yeah, we really do believe and we can verbalize and say, when you accept something, when you know you don't have capacity, like we've seen so many times of how it causes harm or conflict or hurt, right? And so at least for us to like, as people that want and believe in structures of accountability, right? We are accountable to ourselves, but also each other as like co-facilitators on that stuff and our community. And we're like, love y'all. And that doesn't mean we can't stay connected in this way. And also right now, like we aren't unable to show up for you, not because we don't want to, but because we don't want to enable the conditions for harm to thrive. So that's how we've been thinking about it, at least in our org. What about you, Dara?
Yeah, I think there's again, if this is like paid work versus organizing work, right?
Yeah,
I for myself, like, because I've been like fully immersed in both of those spaces and experienced burnout in both of those kinds of oriented work towards social justice or change. And I think it's like for me been an internal process of noticing when I'm doing something out of obligation rather than like joy and excitement. And I know for me, like my own internal stuff about being enough, this is nothing to do with Diva. I don't know what your cycles are, but I'm just kind of giving my own experience around that, has like also fueled a lot of burnout for me. Like I need to do all these things that people ask me to do, or else I won't be enough or do enough. And so like my spiritual healing has been a lot around like, I am enough, even if I'm doing nothing and I'm just being me. And, I think I'm still in that, like, I'm not like arrived there yet, but I think finding the places that I found most life-giving and investing the most time and energy in those spaces has supported me with boundaries. But I really appreciate what you're saying also just about the interpersonal piece that can also fuel burnout, because the way, like I was speaking to earlier, the conflict stuff is like a recipe for burnout, and that if we can't find ways to respect each other and be in a relationship, even if we're not friends or we don't love you, we're not like, oh, this is someone I want to spend all my time with, but we can find ways to be in like generative collaboration. And that, I think we're really stuck in that. So boundaries there too is like, okay, how much can I give and how much do I need to let go? And I think I'm just working on like getting more comfortable with saying no to things. And really, I think it's Adrienne Marie Brown. I don't know who says it. I think it might be Adrienne Marie Brown, but like my no's make more way for my yeses, or my yes, like allow me to say yes in a more full way to other things in my life. So just kind of like trying to remember those things has been helpful to me. I know we don't have a ton of time, so I'll move back to the.
Thank you so much. Yes, we want to honor each other's time, so we're going to stick with the stack that we have now. Adam, if you could briefly unmute yourself and share your question aloud. Then we'll have Sierra and Jessica's question, which is in the chat. And then we will tie up our evening.
Yeah, in the interest of time too, I would say like I'll put the question out there, maybe it doesn't get answered, or maybe you hear the multiple questions and then decide like where your energy is drawn to. That feels good to me. One of the projects I'm working on is trying to create this like Turtle Island based cross Jewish left like transformative justice. I think it's really a cadre more than cohort. I'm wondering if you could speak to like the dichotomy of like opinion one. We already have so much like training and lineage and resources now around community accountability and transformative justice. And what we really need is like practice, like a million experiments, like people just coming together and trying stuff, even if we don't have all the answers. Because often we're like too scared to practice and intervene. Like we notice a thing, but we're afraid to practice and intervene, and we might not get it right, or we might be called out, or we might, when things are small. So then when things do become huge and explode, what else could we possibly do but fail? Because we haven't built those muscles and we haven't intervened at the easier intervention points, but also like we don't have the skills and the practice in our bodies. So like opinion one, and then on the other side of the spectrum of like, before you embark on your project or your intervention, get deeply prepared, have your pods mapped out, have your crews, do all the trainings, like avoid scope creep by being extremely clear in your scope. So I actually think that might be, well, y'all can decide where you want to answer it, but I encourage you to, you don't have to answer it. It's just something I'm sitting with. I think the question I would love for you to answer is, are any of y'all going to share your email address or contact info? That's actually my real question. The other thing is maybe just homework for me to think about. Check.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, go ahead, Sophia. I feel like you're about to share if you want. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's truth in both of those opinions, to be frank. And the best part about being in a cohort, aka like at the end of the program, we're family, right? So this is a group of people that I deeply trust. And so there's a beauty in learning together, right? Collective learning. And we all come from different education status. We all have different experiences, right? And we're very honest when there's that uncertainty. And so when I've done facilitation in the past, it's really helpful to do it with someone that has done a similar mediation or has engaged in this process before in a similar theme. Like me and Dara have done that before, where like Dara has experienced, in the game for like mad years, right? And I'm like, I'm just learning the work. So what am I supposed to do, right? And you don't do this alone, right? We do it in groups of 2, 3, maybe 4, maybe 5, depending on the severity, the expansiveness, how many people. And so it is important, that buddy system in which we learn and people are able to share as a newer learner and someone that has, every experience is new, right? Regardless, right? It's not like a hierarchical reality and like, it's not like a expertise, like that's not what this space is about. And it's really great that you can be honest about the thing that you've learned, your uncomfort, and pairing and doing this together. So that's my comment.
Yeah, I love that, Sophia. I love the mutual piece about mutuality around it. I think for me, like, can we center humility without being
Right.
paralyzed by, like you said, like this is so much about experimentation, but also recognizing, I think there's a tendency also in our culture to be like, I read one book and I'm just like an expert, right? Or I did one thing and that makes me an expert. And so I think valuing practice, and ideally, like Sophia said, like I think the apprenticeship vision, or like that idea of how can I work with folks in a collaborative way, because it's not like someone with like, so I learn from Sophia every time she opens her mouth, right? And so it's not like we don't have things to learn from each other, but to have different experiences present, to be, and I think that also to me is like a practice of humility. Like I don't have everything to offer by myself. We need each other to be able to learn together. And when we make mistakes, call each other in and like support each other in that learning. So just like I said, we don't do stuff alone. It's not in our value system to do that. And I'll pass it to the next person.
All right. And I know that for the sake of time, my wonderful coworker did forward it to the next person. Thank you for that. And that'll be our last question. I'm just looking in the chat for it. Where is it? Okay, from Jessica. I'm gonna paste it back into the bottom, and this is gonna be our last question for the evening. I definitely recommend folks to follow up through the website links that I'll post again. But yeah, this is our last question. Can you speak to making conflict relationship enhancing in your work? The rest is in the bottom as follows. Check it out, and that'll conclude our last Q&A.
Can you speak to making conflict relationship enhancing in your work? Okay, got it. I think about feedback as like the recipe to the practicing feedback, creating containers and structures for giving each other feedback. Grew up in a family that was pretty conflict averse, so I don't think I grew up with the tools to do this easily. And I still struggle with it sometimes, but I think practice honestly is what gets me better at it. So again, at heart, we don't have this unity circles, we have accountability partners. We're really trying to build in like really thoughtful, structured ways to give feedback and making that a low stakes thing to start with. So,
Yeah.
you know, after any kind of interaction where we're holding space together, like going out, we just talked about today, actually, you know, when we're doing these non-emergency responses in pairs, and if we actually go out to meet with somebody, is there a time afterwards to debrief and just be like, what went well, what didn't go well, for facilitating together? Also, like feedback in ways that are positive, like it doesn't always have to be critical feedback, right? Like making sure that there's like a balance in that. And I really think the more practice in that for me, it strengthened my muscle to sit with conflict in a way that doesn't feel as destabilizing and like, this is gonna ruin our relationship. I just wanna give one very quick story. Valeria, who's the co-founder of Unity Circles, and I are very close friends. We had a huge conflict a couple of years ago. Like it took several months for us to actually work it out. And there was a moment where I was like, I don't know if we're gonna be friends anymore. Like, how are we gonna navigate this? And I think the time we took to invest in each other a bit more and like acknowledge each other's experiences actually deepened our relationship. Like, I think we're definitely closer than before that. And so, yeah, and I just seeing this in the chat too, like from Ren, like we say like, not if conflict happens, when it will happen, right? It's going to happen. So let's just normalize that and be okay with that. And actually embrace it as something that can be, and we actually were doing an activity like the 4 corners, agree, disagree kind of activity the other day, and just being like, let's invite conflict. Let's invite experiences where we can like show our different perspectives in a way that again doesn't feel like, oh my God, this is an attack on me. Just like, this is a moment where we see things differently. And how do we engage that? I'll pass it to you, Sophia.
Yeah, I think yeah, debriefing in general is essential when you hold space or when you're with community in general. I think that's really important to normalize feedback. Yeah, I think as a young person, talking to my parents, to my siblings, right? Like as the eldest child, so shout out to y'all. I have tried my best to practice and share how, you know, when conflict is occurring, how I want people to talk to me, how I'm showing up, what are the feelings that are arising when and if I feel ready in this moment to engage in this conversation. And you have to honor your gut, right? Like you have to be able to decipher at times what is uncomfort, right? And then like get into that stretch zone and be like, okay, like this makes me uncomfortable, but like I think I can do it. And then that zone after, in which like it's destabilizing, right? Like you have to, that is also like a life practice, and that's going to be through experience. It's like deciphering when like, okay, I can stretch myself, I can stretch, but like the stretching has gone a little too far. I feel destabilized. So yeah, I've been talking to my sister, I've been talking to my friends, my homies, when we're disagreeing, of like, okay, like we disagree, and also, you have to be patient, leaning into the patience, leaning into the realities of like, it's going to take time. So maybe at this moment you feel like this person ain't ready for that conversation. That doesn't mean they never will be. So coming from that place of like, and maybe one day they will, at least for me, makes me more hopeful, or makes me lean into conflict, because I hope, right, in the line, that someday we can have this conversation and feeling ready for that. So start with your friends, start with people that like you really rock with, like your homies, you know what I'm saying, where like you've really been through something, where you can share the complexities of your lived experience with each other. Start there and just share, how you want to engage in conflict, or how to discuss when conflict is occurring, and go from there.
And I just want to thank you all and call it time for this evening. So please give a lot of hands and emojis. I mean that in the digital sense. And I will pass it off to Sierra, and we can stop recording.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I want to thank Dara and Sophia so much for sharing your wisdom and all of your learnings. We truly appreciate it.